everyone, and welcome to another episode of Annie Talks, where we bring to you interesting stories about interesting people that you want to know about. I'm your host, Annie Rivera. Thank you for tuning in, and to those who have already subscribed. If you're new to the podcast, welcome, and I hope you enjoy what you hear. And if so, I personally invite you to subscribe. Annie Talks is brought to you by Luxwear Trends, affordable, luxurious timepieces for every occasion, luxury that lasts forever, and that's what sets us apart from others. Find us on Facebook and Instagram or visit luxweartrends.com. That's Luxe weartrends.com. My guest on this episode is Jeff Rojas, an American photographer and author based in New York City. His primary body of work is advertising and editorial photography that has been published in both Elle and Esquire. Jeff also frequents as a photography instructor. His teaching experience includes platforms like CreativeLive, WPPI, the Photo Plus Expo, Imaging USA, and APA. Jeff has written articles that have been featured in Entrepreneur Magazine and FStoppers. I met Jeff while working for a high-end display monitor company. I've worked very closely with Jeff over the past few years and have been on location with him in Chicago, New York, San Francisco, and Los Angeles. He's very well respected in the photography industry by his peers, his fans, and followers. His work is absolutely amazing, and I'm very excited for all of you to have the opportunity to get to know him. So here now is my conversation with Jeff Rojas. So I have today on this episode my wonderful friend, Jeff Rojas, who is a photographer and entrepreneur. Jeff, thank you so much for being on my show today.
Thanks for having me.
Oh, I'm so excited to just jump right in and get to know more of you. I mean, I know you, but the rest of the world doesn't know you. So let's do that. Let's get to know Jeff. Let's get to know Jeff Rojas, the photographer. So give us a sense of your background. Give us a sense of your upbringing and, you know, how you became a photographer. So let's start from the beginning. Yeah.
Sure. That works for me. I was born in Brooklyn, New York, moved to Florida when I was 11. So I did a stint for about 8 years. And the second it was legal, I moved back to New York City to pursue a career in corporate America. So shortly, 19th birthday, worked in a student high pretty much until I was about 24 years old. And I got laid off twice before committing to a hobby full-time, that hobby being photography, and turned it into a full-time job. So
what were you doing before? So if I may ask, you said you were working in 2 full-time jobs before that. So what were you doing before?
It's a good question. So one of the things I did was work in private equity. I worked as an account manager for a data recovery company. I had been a regional sales manager for a different company. So mostly sales in corporate environments. So.
Awesome. And then, so now was photography something you've always wanted to do, or is it something you just kind of picked up? And then how did that organically grow into what you do now?
That's a really good question. So I didn't plan on becoming a photographer whatsoever. It's something I fell into. So my family has people that are extremely creative, but they have full-time jobs. Right. So like my mom is, I would say, creatively one of the most creative people that I know. And my uncle can photo replicate drawings, and they're gorgeous, amazing pieces, but both of them have a full-time job. My uncle's a union electrician. My mom's a human resources director for a company. So ultimately, they both have full-time jobs, even though they had creativity in their genes. And effectively, I didn't see that as a viable career, particularly because I didn't have any influence until I met somebody that was running a full-time career as a photographer. I didn't realize it could have been a potential business. And when I realized that there's value in being a photographer, it was something that I wanted to pursue. And I had enough of a buffer after getting laid off, so 3 months of severance, to make it successful.
Awesome. So now what kind of photography, twofold. What kind of photography did you start off doing, and then what do you do now?
So when I first picked up my camera, I used to photograph cars. I was documenting a restoration I did on a classic car that I was building. And effectively that love of the car went to photography and learning how to light. So from then I was doing almost fashion photography and some vintage pieces of some sort. And that's manifested itself into portraits. And now my latest body of work for the last couple of years has been commercial and advertising and editorial for personal projects. So like if I'm going to shoot an editorial, it's for like a fashion magazine or a beauty publication, but those are generally my things that I love to do. And then the commercial, I sell obviously makeup campaigns and jean campaigns and stuff like that.
So now, let's talk a little bit about some of your techniques in photography, because I think you do this also when you go around the world in your speaking engagements and in your teaching and your workshops. So what kind of things that you teach and what kind of techniques and technology that you use now?
Yeah, so I think one of the most important things for most creatives is just simplifying their process. I think we tend to overcomplicate things. Mm-hmm. So what I try to do is bring things down to the core simple process, almost the same way that you run a business. You don't want to do it where it's too complex because it's very difficult to replicate things that you're doing. So lighting, posing, directing, production is as simple as possible, whatever it's going to take to get the job done. So think about it like a lean method to everything that I do.
Now, were there any mentors or people that inspired you to do those kinds of things, to be better were you like an apprentice to somebody? I mean, I'm curious to see how you, the photographer, got the knowledge that you do or have.
That's a good question. So I assist somebody who's teaching, the full-time, effectively teaching instructor. Without much practical information of how to run a actual portrait business. So while I learned the techniques of photography from someone, it was very difficult to learn the commercial process. But what I did was contextualize everything that I had learned working in sales and marketing to my photography business. So I was able to be successful that way.
Okay. And then do you have a mentor? Do you have somebody that you look up to now currently?
I'm very competitive. So my best friend is the person that I look for competition. So I love him wholeheartedly. And this is somebody that I look at. We constantly compete. I also have learned to make friends that are entrepreneurs and business people, because when it comes to income, when it comes to sales, we're constantly competing with one another. So I think all of us really don't have a quote unquote mentor, but we're in competition so much, and it's friendly competition. It's not mean-spirited competition. It's quite literally, hey, I got this. And it's like, damn, I didn't get to do that. And then it's that constant sense of catching up. So like even my orthodontist is effectively turned into a partner / competitor. I love her wholeheartedly, but she wants to create a YouTube channel. So I had not created YouTube content in almost a year. And I'm like, wait a second, you can't do more than I am. I mean, you run a full-time business and you're not going to beat me. So I was doing one every day. And now like I'll text her, be like, hey, what's up? Why aren't you catching up? So it's that constant sense of competition that keeps me going.
And it's neat though, because even though it is, friendly competition, it actually kind of inspires you and motivates you to, one up your game, right? Don't you think? I mean, for me, it does. Yeah, always. Because you always want to be on the cutting edge, because if somebody's going to ask you for tips and tips and how-tos, you yourself have to be up on the technology. So I like that about you. And I think we have pretty much the same, we're kindred spirits in that sense,
Yeah. And I think it helps push your business as well, because it's a sense of staying stagnant. I think most people who fail in business is because they're not growing, they're not adapting to the marketplace. So that competition leads to innovation and moving forward, which is always amazing.
Now, let's give a sense of our relationship. We've known each other for a few years. When I used to work for a high-end display monitor company a couple years back. And so I've actually seen you in action. I've seen you in action a few times at some of the workshops and speaking engagements. I want to talk a little bit about those. Without naming names and without naming, a specific workshop.
Okay.
I know that you and I have had some fun run-ins and whatnot at some of these places, but what is maybe one of your memorable, if you can remember if you can get a gist of what I'm asking you, what is one memorable workshop that you've had, or maybe it wasn't the one I'm thinking of, or maybe it's not one you're thinking of, but what's the one memorable place, and where's the furthest workshop? The twofold. what is the most memorable workshop or speaking engagement you've had? And then what's the furthest any one of the speaking engagements has taken you to, like what country, what city, what, can you talk about that?
That's a good question. So the first part of that is, it's probably not one that you're aware of, but okay. I got hired to go speak at a primarily women's conference. And there I am as the lead speaker for a women's conference. So I had one of the other guest speakers, not that, again, I'm supposed to just be the only one that's the person opening the show. And the person that is a good friend of mine looks at me, and she's a woman. She goes, "I can't believe they hired a man to teach in front of a ton of women." And I said, well, as a feminist myself, isn't it equality? I mean, you guys have a totally female audience. What's wrong about having a male in the audience? She's like, you have no idea what it is to be in that audience. So I flipped that whole narrative on her. I said, okay, we'll see what we're going to do. So I created a whole presentation based on the fact that I wouldn't be where I am today, realistically, if it wasn't for my mother. I mean, most of the things that I've done in life have been lessons she's taught me, things that she's directed me as a child. And I think that, once you turn 18, you are an adult, but you're also a product of everything, the way that you were raised. And my mom wasn't a single mom, but with my stepdad working all the time, I mean, effectively, she was very much almost a singular parent in different times of my life. So without her, I couldn't be here. So I flipped the whole narrative on my friend and said, see, here's a product of every female energy. Without the female energy, I wouldn't be here. So therefore, you're wrong, I'm right. And I proved them wrong. That was the kind of thought process.
That is so cool. It was very innovative, creative, and so you were able to make it appropriate for that venue and that engagement. So that's awesome.
But it's also truthful. I think that's like without good moms. I mean, most of the guys in this world, I don't think most of the successful men in this world, I don't think would be successful, just because they don't have that motherly structure that's going to guide them as a child. Sometimes we need that. I think that's something that we definitely need as kids.
Well, thank you for that. I think your mom would be very happy and very proud to hear that, because mothers do come, with all the tools and tricks in their purses and bags, and they pull them out for, a good time. And we always, and I think for me as a mother, we always want to make our children more successful than us. That's kind of my goal as well. So thank you.
I mean, you've done that successfully. I mean, you out of all people know that you've done that successfully. So
stop it. Thank you. Thank you so much. So now, what's the furthest workshop or speaking engagement you've had? Because of the line of work that you do, I'm sure it's taking you all over the place. So talk about that.
Sure. Official workshop, probably Dubai. I would say unofficial workshop in Egypt, which isn't, that far away, but that was not physically, that was digitally, which is why I say Dubai. I was physically in Dubai. And then I have probably a couple scheduled in Japan in the next couple of years. I just need to really understand the market. I think a little more before I take that role on.
So what are one of the takeaways that you take back from those types of when you're visiting? I mean, not only do you see, it's a whole different perspective. You see beautiful environments and nature and whatnot, but what's one takeaway that you take away from each of those engagements and places that you go to?
So one of the things I took from Japan specifically was just honesty and communication. I think in business, one of the things that, especially in the American market, you're always trying to get one leg up on the person that you're negotiating with. And when you go to Japan, it's very open and honest. It's here's what's on the table, what I'm providing you, and this is what I expect in return, and vice versa. So there's always that open dialogue. I took that back to the United States, and that's kind of the mindset I've had over the last year. I'm willing to provide you X of value if you're willing to provide me X of value. So much so, I have a tattoo here from the trip that I made to Japan about 2 years ago. I went to Mount Inari, and these are some of the statues that you would see along the place. That's how much of an impact it had on my life, that I tattooed it permanently on my wall.
Wow, that is so awesome. I like that. Of course, you probably wouldn't want to do that to every place that you visit. Just imagine instead of stickers on your luggage, you'd have tattoos on all over your.
That's pretty much it. Yeah.
Awesome. So now you talked a little bit about when you go to these workshops and places and locations. I'm sure there's things that come up and that maybe pose some challenges. But on that note, what are some of the challenges that you face, or what is one challenge that you can think of that you faced as a photographer, and how have you been able to overcome it?
I would say pre-production is a nightmare when you're not physically on location and trusting that things are going to go the way that they are. I've learned not to think that things are going to go the way they are, and effectively looking at things with the mindset that stuff is going to go wrong, and to be adaptable, I think is the most important thing as a photographer. So, as an example, the person that I mentored under was photographing a WNBA player in Turkey, in Istanbul, Turkey. Mm-hmm. So we're photographing this person, and we get to the studio, and they said it was a large size studio for Turkey. We get there, and it's about 7 feet tall and maybe 5 feet wide. She's a WNBA player. She's like 6'4", and we're photographing her on a 7-foot screen. And we're supposed to photograph her full length, which poses an issue in camera. I mean, anything that we do is pretty much going to distort the image if we don't take it the right way. So being adaptable, not letting that frustrate you. I mean, we flew there overnight from doing a whole couple workshops, flew to Istanbul, literally right off the plane directly to go do the shoot. We're exhausted, we're tired, and then we're pretty much in front of the least interesting position possible, the least successful position possible. We have to make it successful. So constantly being on your toes, I think, is the most important thing as you're traveling around the world.
I hope you're enjoying this podcast episode. We'll be right back after this short message from one of our sponsors. Comfotherm thermal wraps are designed to help relieve the pain and swelling in and around the jaw, especially after wisdom teeth extractions. For more information, visit comfotherm.com. That's comfotherm.com. Now, are you a one-man crew, or do you hire other help to go along with you?
Depends on the assignment. So there are times where, like, if I'm doing a commercial project and I know I can go with a skeleton crew, and it's a smaller group, I'm happy with that. I like smaller groups that we get along, we can have fun, and when the client's involved, that's so much easier. So perfect example, I did a jean campaign in Rhode Island. In the jean campaign, I brought my assistant, who's also my tech. I also brought a second assistant to help out along, anything that I need. And the second assistant was more so catered to making sure my client was looking at the monitor, making sure that they're going through the images, that they like what they see with the art director. And it made my life a lot easier doing that. But, oftentimes I can get away with one other person to make a campaign successful, because my job is to really focus on capturing those images. If I can give away some of the, or rather delegate some of the techie portions, I'm extremely happy, because it gives me a successful position to making this production happen.
Makes sense. So now, on the other side of the coin, talk a little bit about some maybe a memorable moment or your greatest achievement thus far.
I think everything that I do throughout the day is almost a checklist. So every single thing that I accomplish is almost an achievement. So, writing 2 textbooks sounds grandiose to most people. To me, it's a small checklist and a list of things to happen. So I don't really hold on to too many achievements, more so, and look at them as stepping stones for the next thing. So I'm constantly looking at what's next. I'd say my biggest achievements are when someone tells me I can't do something and I prove them wrong, because I'm competitive that way. Like, if you tell me I can't do X and I do X, I'm going to look at you and be like, I told you so. And that's an achievement for me. But
you are competitive. That's for sure.
Very competitive.
So talk about your books. Let's segue into your books. I know that you have, at the time when I knew you, or not when I knew you, but at the time, I knew that you were writing your second book. So I know that there's, in fact, go ahead. Why don't you talk about all your books?
So there's 2 books already written, Photographing Men and Photographing Women. It's been 2 years since I wrote Photographing Men, and I actually, right before this podcast, got the requested redo Photographing Men, or do the second edition rather of Photographing Men. I'm writing a book on creative entrepreneurship at the present moment. So I'd say within the next 6 months to a year, I'll have another 2. So it'll be a total of 4 books written within that time. I would love to do 5, I'd say, before I turn 35. So, which is 5 years down the line. I'm purposely giving myself a 5-year buffer.
Yeah.
So.
So are you the kind of person that when writing, when you have a deadline, do you like to have to sequester yourself and then, really hone in on the writing part? Do you like make the world go away? What's the writing style of Jeff?
I'm a chronic procrastinator, so I wait to the last minute to do anything. And that's when I'm most successful. I actually saw a meme recently that said, the reason I continue to procrastinate is because basically nothing happens and I still get it done anyway. So why take the time to do it? So that's effectively my life. I purposely inundate myself with stuff. I'm like, oh, well, everything's last minute basically. And it just feels purposeful. So. Yeah.
Oh my gosh. That is so funny. Now, talk a little bit now about two things. Let's talk about, I have all these numbers, one thing, first thing, second thing. Talk about the name. What's the name of your business? What's your entrepreneurship? What's the name of your business?
So the legal title to my business is Jeff Rojas, LLC. So I am the business. As Jay-Z would say,
I am the business. And, but your DBA is Jeff Rojas Photography.
It's Jeff Rojas, LLC. So again, like Jay-Z, I'm a business man. And it's effectively it. So
awesome. Okay. We'll talk a little bit more about like where we can find you and that kind of stuff. But now talk about your YouTube channel, because I know that you're, and that's one of the things that when I was working for that high-end display monitor, that was one of the things that we were, our relationship was it built on that, the types of YouTube tutorials that you were doing. So what other things do you do on your YouTube channel?
So I've been doing a lot of discussions around business in general and giving effectively creative entrepreneurs, business artists, the ability to be able to understand their value and be able to walk into the marketplace and discuss that value. Mm-hmm. Primarily, I'm creating those videos because I'm writing my third book on creative entrepreneurship, and I love to get feedback from people and so basically giving all the information away for free and then getting feedback, as much feedback as I can get. So what are people having issues with? What are people having questions with? Mm-hmm. I don't think until you hit the market with that, do you understand what you're getting back. And again, it's a trial, it's a test. Mm-hmm. The second thing is producing content and documenting, I guess, my life in a way, because I want to show that where there's always progress. And I think that most people don't document where they were and where they are. And I think YouTube is almost like a Bible, a journal of things that are happening along the way. And then being able to share things that you're learning along the way as well. So that's where the lighting tutorials are coming in. Sometimes I'm learning those, a couple months before I post them, and effectively try to not master them, but get them to a point where I feel comfortable showing someone else, and then sharing that with the world.
I find that interesting that you just said, documenting and, chronologing. Boy, is that the right word? Chronologing. Kind of the steps along the way. I found that interesting because just this week I went back and I started looking at some of my older YouTube videos. Some are cringeworthy.
That's okay.
But then some of them are like hit the mark, and I'm thinking to myself, see, I knew I did that for a reason, and I know somebody's going to benefit from this. So you have an audience, and what kind of feedback are you getting from your audience? Are they giving you like, oh, great tutorial, or do you get like what can you do about haters? But then do you get those that are like negative and, maybe say, oh, this didn't do it? Yeah, I just want to hear from you. How do you how do you combat against some of those haters and some of those comments are out there, or how do you take in the compliments?
As they say, haters are a good thing. The difference is that most people tell you to avoid them. I hit them head on. Why? Because I look at it this way. So one of the things I always ask haters, I produce a ton of lighting tutorials, for example. And one of the things is people are like, that'll never work, or you can probably do that with a cheaper setup. And I'm like, well, show me your portfolio. I've gotten to a point where I'll publish my portfolio, I'll publish everything, and I'll have somebody say, I could do better. And I'm like, I Google their name, and I literally have said this in comments. I Googled your name, and you're absolutely lying. And people die laughing because it's true. Like at the end of the day, there's a lot of quote unquote keyboard warriors. And what I've learned to do is not care. So effectively, I did that for a long time. But even then, it still frustrates me, and I'll get into a little keyboard battle with somebody. But then I'll realize the longer I do that, the less I am being productive. The less I'm committing to the things that I'm doing successfully, right? And the information, if it's coming from a good place, like the business stuff, it gives me the ability to help the people that need help. And if you're going to hate, you're going to hate, and I could care less. Those people that are going to sit there trolling online on every single, page that they have, that's effectively, it's ineffective. You're not doing
Yeah.
anything and you're not committing to something that's successful. I'm there to help out the community. So I've had a ton of really good feedback, and in doing and being open, honest, and candid with everything I have to say and giving that to people, I've had a lot of people come to defend me against trolls where I don't have to do that anymore, which is amazing to have because they understand the value of what I'm presenting.
Ah, awesome. So now we're kind of winding down, but now if you had to do anything differently in your career, what would that be?
Start making mistakes sooner.
Really?
Start making a lot more mistakes sooner, and then stop waiting for things to be perfect before moving forward. I think what stops us from being successful is the sense of perfection. You know, for example, if you sat here for 3 weeks trying to edit this video, it's going to take you 3 weeks to do, and effectively it's not going to hit the marketplace, right? And there are so many other things that you should be doing successfully, or at least attempting to, throughout those 3 week periods. Like, what's the ROI in that? And here's a perfect example. If you're a numbers person and viewership is of importance to you, let's say you're looking to get 3,000 views on your average video. It takes you 3 weeks to produce something and you get 3,000 people. What's better, 3,000 people for one video that took you 3 weeks, or 2,000 people over the course, of 20 videos that you can edit during the same time, right? So the volume kind of speaks for itself. I think that the longer you take to perfect something, the more chance you're giving a competitor to hit the marketplace. But at the same time, it gives you a sense of understanding. It's like trial and error at the same token. I think companies like Facebook, for example, if they waited to be where they are today to put that whole content out into the world, they wouldn't be who they are today. They grew with the marketplace. And I think that works with everything that we do. You don't have to be perfect or perfectionist to accomplish things. You just need to be good at trying, because it's the trial and error thing that continually builds, and learning from your mistakes. And to your point before, your haters are people that often are people who attempted, failed, and now are negative towards a situation. So don't let that affect that either. Continue moving forward. Don't be perfect. Just continue, grinding away at whatever you're trying to attempt.
Awesome. Now, what would you, I love this question, and for everybody that I talk to, I love to hear the responses. So what would you tell your 21-year-old self about your future?
Stop working for someone else and do it yourself. You are young enough to where if you make a mistake, it's not going to affect you much. If you're going to try to put out a business right now, people might not take you seriously, but it gives you the chance to learn something and learn on your feet. So I would probably slap myself in the back of the head and say, stop trying to be an adult, just be a kid, make mistakes, and it's okay. Yeah. I spent too much time in my early 20s trying to be a lot more mature than I really was and take the normal route, the normal 9 to 5. And I learned a ton, but I would have learned a ton faster if I made more mistakes more quickly.
So the lesson here is, make a name for yourself earlier, right? And pursue something that you want to do, as opposed to, working for somebody else.
Stop being fearful and just go out and try new things. Okay. Stop letting fear be the deciding factor of whether or not you're going to do something, or feel like you're confident enough to do something. And I think that's with anything. There were many times I had the ability to travel or to go do things that I didn't do, because primarily the fear of doing said thing. And it wasn't until I said, you know what, screw it, let me just do it, that I started gaining more experience in all things, in all facets of life. What's the worst that's going to happen? And my whole thing is like, try anything once. If it's traveling and jumping on a plane, and you're scared of jumping on a plane, but you've never been on one, just go on the plane. What's the worst that's going to happen? Like the whole premise is that it's trial and error. The more you try, the more effectively you succeed. And it doesn't matter how many times you fail, as long as you continue moving forward. If I was my age now and told my 21-year self anything, there's 168 hours in a week. Make the most of them. You probably aren't working as much as you say you are, and also make mistakes. And it's okay to make mistakes, but learn from them and learn quickly and continue moving forward.
Ah, very good. I love that. Learn from your mistakes and keep moving forward. So don't let it beat you down. Jump back on your feet, get back on your feet, get back on that horse, and just keep moving forward. I love it. All awesome advice. Now, for all those young entrepreneurs and young aspiring photographers out there, what parting words would you, what parting words can you give them?
There's 168 hours in a week. Make the most of them.
Awesome. Awesome. and your example is perfect. So thank you so much for that. Well, tell us where we can find you. What's your website and what's your social media? Where can we find you?
So I'm going to tell you the easiest way to do that. Just Google my name. So effectively, you'll find me everywhere. I mean, I've written for Entrepreneur.com. I've written textbooks. I've done a ton of different things. If you want my content, Google's the easiest way to do that. Just Google Jeff Rojas. I'm literally the only Jeff Rojas that has any relevancy towards content on there.
Awesome. And then for all the listeners, I will have all the information. I'll have his links and his website and all that information down in the show notes below. So be sure to click around. Jeff, thank you so much for being on my show. I truly
Thank you for having me.
Absolutely. Well, that's it, everyone. I hope you enjoyed this episode of Annie Talks and getting to know Jeff Rojas. I love what he said, learn from your mistakes and keep moving forward. And I also love how he says to take and make the most of every opportunity. Hop on over to check out his website at SAJORFFEJ.com. And if you look closely at those letters, you'll see that they spell Jeff Rojas backward. Clever, huh? You can simply Google Jeff Rojas Photography and find him that way too. I'll have all that information and all of Jeff's social media links down below in the show notes, so don't forget to check them out. Now, before we sign off, if you aren't already subscribed to my podcast, I invite you to hit subscribe and be notified anytime we upload a new episode. If you are already subscribed, thank you so much. I truly appreciate it. If you could also please rate and review my podcast, please leave a comment or two. It would really help me out, and it would also help others to find this podcast. You can also follow me on all of my social media, Instagram, Twitter, and Facebook, and Snapchat. I will have the link to all my social media below in the show notes for you as well. And lastly, if you enjoy this podcast, please consider contributing to my Patreon page. Your contributions will help to further the vision and mission of Annie Talks so that we can produce more episodes like this one and many other types of episodes and topics. The Patreon page will also be included in the show notes below. Thank you all again so much for tuning in, and keep listening to Annie Talks.
Hey guys, my name is Jeff Rojas. I'm a photographer, author, and educator based in New York City, and you're listening to Annie Talks.